From ruling the biggest tables to losing it all in front of everyone, these are the most satisfying downfalls in poker history. And coming in at number 1, Annie Duke. For years, Annie Duke built a reputation as a sharp, fearless player. She earned respect, money, and major sponsorships, including a high-profile deal with Ultimate Bet. Her brother, Howard Lederer, was also deeply involved in the online poker boom through Full Tilt. From the outside, it looked like the Duke-Lederer family was sitting at the center of poker's golden age. Then the cracks appeared. By the late 2000s, ugly rumors began swirling around online poker. Ultimate Bet was hit by a massive cheating scandal involving super users who could see opponents' hole cards. Founder Russ Hamilton later admitted that millions had been stolen. Regulators stepped in, but the punishment was light, and most players never got their money back. Annie denied knowing anything about the cheating, and no proof ever surfaced against her. But the damage was done. In poker, perception can be just as deadly as guilt. Trying to move forward, Annie helped launch the Epic Poker League, an ambitious, invite-only series designed to showcase the game's elite. On paper, it sounded revolutionary. In reality, it launched right into disaster. Black Friday in April 2011 crushed online poker in the US, sponsorship money dried up, and the league began bleeding cash. While players waited for promised payouts, executives were still receiving large salaries. By early 2012, the league collapsed into bankruptcy, and the promised million-dollar free roll never happened. At that point, the poker world turned cold. Annie became unwelcome at tables she once dominated. Public criticism grew louder, and leaked tapes years later dragged her name back into the Ultimate Bet controversy.
And I did take this money, and I'm not trying to make it right, Dan, so we got to get that out of the way real quick, okay?
She denied everything, but the cloud never fully lifted. By 2012, Annie Duke walked away from poker for good, her career not ending with a final hand, but with silence, suspicion, and a legacy forever debated. Tom Dwan. At first, everything lined up perfectly. The moment he turned 21, his live tournament career exploded. Online, under the name Durer, he was already a millionaire, feared by the best players in the world. He played without hesitation, took on the biggest games, and lived the rounder's fantasy for real. Young, brilliant, and fearless, Dwan looked untouchable. Then the cracks began to show. In late 2009, Dwan ran into the biggest downswing of his life. He lost millions to Phil Ivey, then stepped into a legendary online battle with a mysterious new player known as Isildur 1. What everyone expected to be a quick victory turned into a shocking collapse. Over days and weeks, millions of dollars flowed the wrong way. For the first time, the poker world watched Durer bleed chips instead of taking them. The fear factor was gone. Dwan understood variance, but the timing couldn't have been worse. In 2011, online poker collapsed in the US, and Black Friday wiped away the world that had made him famous. After that, he vanished. No interviews, no WSOP appearances, just rumors. Some said he was broke. Others claimed he was trapped in dangerous overseas games. The truth was quieter and stranger. Dwan was still playing, but far from cameras, buried in ultra-high-stakes cash games in Macau, where single pots were worth more than entire tournament careers. As the years passed, his public presence faded even more. When he did resurface, it wasn't for poker brilliance, but for confusion and concern. In 2025, a series of alarming public messages showed a man clearly disconnected from reality, overwhelmed by fear and paranoia. The once calculated genius now seemed lost inside his own mind. Doctors described the episode as acute psychosis, and Dwan himself later admitted that his perception of events had become distorted. The aftermath only deepened the uncertainty. Legal threats, accusations, and silence followed. The confident prodigy who once stared down legends now appeared withdrawn and unstable, carrying the weight of years spent in extreme pressure, isolation, and unimaginable stakes. Gus Hansen. For a moment, it felt like Gus Hansen was on top of the poker world again. In 2010, everything finally came together. He won his first ever World Series of Poker bracelet in the High Roller Heads Up event, pocketing over $450,000 and proving he could still battle with the elite. If that wasn't enough, he closed the year in spectacular fashion by winning Poker Million 9 and walking away with a cool $1 million. It looked like a full-blown comeback. But that high didn't last. By 2012, the warning signs were impossible to ignore. At the Aussie Millions $250,000 challenge, Gus made the final table, an achievement most players only dream of. He finished third, behind Patrick Antonius and Phil Ivey, and earned $820,000. On paper, it was a huge result. In reality, it marked the beginning of the end. After that tournament, the big wins stopped coming. Small cashes here and there weren't enough to sustain the kind of high-stakes lifestyle Gus had lived for years. Behind the scenes, the real damage was happening online. Gus was losing staggering amounts of money playing online poker, reportedly more than $21 million, more than anyone else in history. It wasn't that the competition had changed, it was how the game was played. Without face-to-face reads, table presence, and live interaction, Gus struggled. The screen stripped away the instincts that once made him dangerous. Slowly, doubt crept in. He began questioning whether the game had passed him by, whether he was rusty, or whether he was simply no longer good enough. The hardest part was admitting the truth. Online poker just wasn't his game, and to make matters worse, he insisted on playing against the absolute best players in the world, night after night. What he saw as education turned into extremely expensive tuition. Eventually, the bankroll couldn't keep up. So Gus made a decision few would have expected. He stepped away. He took a regular office job as an accountant, shifted his focus to backgammon, and worked on rebuilding what he'd lost. For a man once living the high life of poker's biggest stages, it had to sting. Still, no one believed he was gone forever. Gus Hansen never played just for the money. He played for the rush, the challenge, and the joy of outthinking his opponents. And in many ways, that same passion that made him great also fueled his downfall, until at last, the Great Dane simply ran out of chips. Stu Ungar, after shocking the poker world by winning the 1980 World Series of Poker Main Event, despite barely knowing Texas Hold'em, Ungar quickly became a legend. He defended his title in 1981, cementing his reputation as a once-in-a-generation talent. With his photographic memory, sky-high IQ, and fearless instincts, many believed no one could touch him at the table. He wasn't just great, he seemed unstoppable. But that same mind that made him brilliant wasn't built for balance. Long, non-stop poker sessions pushed Ungar toward drugs, first as a way to stay awake, then as a full-blown addiction. Cocaine took control, and everything around him began to crumble. His marriage ended, tragedy struck his family, and his belief that he could never lose only fueled reckless gambling decisions. Money came in fast, and disappeared even faster. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, Ungar was spiraling. Casinos banned him. Friends backed him just to keep him afloat. At one point, he was even financed by dangerous people, putting his life at risk far beyond the poker table. His health deteriorated, his focus vanished, and entire tournaments slipped away because he simply couldn't show up. The poker world slowly moved on without him. By the mid-90s, Ungar was seen as a relic, an old genius who had burned too bright. Then, in 1997, came one final miracle. Backed at the last second, he entered the WSOP main event and somehow won it all, becoming a 3-time champion. For a brief moment, it felt like redemption. He dedicated the win to his daughter and admitted his greatest enemy had always been himself. Sadly, nothing changed. Within months, his share of the winnings was gone. Spent on drugs and gambling, his health collapsed further, his addiction deepened, and opportunities slipped through his fingers. By 1998, he was broke, isolated, and barely surviving. Friends tried again to help him rebuild, but time had run out. On November 22nd, 1998, Stu Ungar was found dead in a small Las Vegas motel room. He was just 45 years old. No drugs were found, only unanswered questions. Poker lost one of its greatest minds, not to another player, but to the demons he could never outrun. Mike Matusow. At the turn of the millennium, Mike was flying high. He won his first WSOP bracelet in 2000 and proved he wasn't just a loud personality, but an elite, versatile poker mind. He could dominate mixed games, hold his own against anyone, and cash in almost any format. From the outside, it looked like he had it all figured out. Then came one bad night, one bad decision, and a door that never closed again. After a painful tournament loss, Mattisau was introduced to ecstasy. What started as a way to numb frustration quickly became a lifestyle. Partying replaced discipline. Poker took a back seat to all-night binges that lasted entire weekends. For a while, he felt unstoppable, popular, fearless, and untouchable. But underneath the chaos, his game was quietly eroding. His instincts dulled. His focus disappeared. By the 2001 WSOP, the warning signs were impossible to ignore. Desperate to get his edge back, Mattisau turned to stronger stimulants. At first, it seemed to work. He made deep tournament runs and convinced himself he had cracked the code. Drugs for partying, drugs for poker, everything perfectly balanced. But balance was an illusion. Long sessions turned into multi-day marathons, and his A-game vanished when exhaustion and paranoia took over. Off the felt, things unraveled even faster. His temper, already infamous, exploded more often. He alienated players, burned bridges, and developed a reputation that followed him everywhere. Then came the biggest collapse of all, his arrest in 2003 for drug-related charges after helping the wrong person. Suddenly, the loudest guy in poker was sitting in jail, staring down a future that could have ended his career completely. Though he survived that chapter and later found success during the poker boom, the damage never truly healed. Black Friday wiped out his sponsorships. Injuries left him unable to play. Sports betting drained what little money remained. Each comeback attempt only dug the hole deeper. Eventually, Mattisau did change, getting clean, stepping away from chaos, and rebuilding slowly. But by then, the story had shifted. He was no longer chasing greatness. He was fighting to stay afloat. Once a symbol of raw talent and excess, Mike Mattisau became a cautionary tale of how brilliance, unchecked ego, and addiction can tear everything down, no matter how high the peak once was.